In this video, you're going to write code which will sort the table rows by name. So the user is going to be able to click on the name header, and then the items will be sorted by name. So in the final website, this is how it's going to work. So you click there. So now the names are sorted in ascending order. If I click again, they are sorted in descending order. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to need to create a JavaScript file, which we will link to this HTML file. So let's go to project files and create the JavaScript file right there. So I'm going to call it script.js. And let's make sure that we link it properly, just like we linked the CSS file. So let's add the script at the end of the body. And the source of the script is going to be project files/script.js. So to start, let's just console.log something to make sure that it's correctly linked. So if I refresh the page and then open the console, then we can see hello there. Now let's open or inspect the table body and try to understand what we really need to do exactly. So this is our table body. Inside the table body, you've got the different table rows. And you're going to use the data name attribute to sort these elements by name, right? So table rows, they are children of the table body HTML element. But we don't have a function which will sort children using a specific parameter or according to a specific parameter. But we do know that in JavaScript, we can sort arrays. So if you take an array like this one, and you use the method sort, then you know that this is going to sort your array. Here we go. So by default, it's going to be sorted in ascending order. So we need to find a way to convert the content of our table to an array, and then we'll be able to sort the elements using the sort method. Now, did you know that you can pass a function to the sort method? Well, let's try the sort method on an array of strings, for example. And let's see what we get. So we managed to sort the strings in ascending order. Now, what if instead of strings, we've got objects? So for example, let's say that we've got an object with a name and age. So in this scenario, how would we sort the array using the name, for example? So here you can pass a function to the sort method, and that function will actually decide how to compare two elements. So let's try a function which will take two elements, A and B, or person 1 and person 2. So here, let's say that we want to compare names. So you can create a constant, name 1, which is going to be the name of person 1. And then create another one, name 2, which is going to be the name of person 2. Now, if you want to ignore casing when doing your ordering, you can just convert everything to uppercase before doing any sorting, like that. And then you will decide what you're going to return. So if you return -1, then in your order, person 1 is going to be smaller than person 2. If you return 1, then person 1 is going to be greater than person 2. If you return 0, then they're going to be equal in your ordering. So let's write this in an if statement. So if name 1 is smaller than name 2, then you return -1. And if name 1 is greater than name 2, you return 1. Otherwise, if you've got equal names, you return 0. All right, let's try this. And there's a comment. That error that you get there is just because we couldn't find this file. So let's try our code. And you can see that we have just ordered the elements by name in the ascending order. Now, instead of name, if you try age, and let's change the age. So let's put 40 right there and 35 right there. So now if you try the code, they are going to be sorted by age in the ascending order. Now, what if you want to order the elements in the descending order, not the ascending order? So all you need to do is, after sorting the array, you just reverse it. Like that. So if you try, now they're going to be sorted in the descending order. So hopefully the idea is becoming clear. So what we need to do is create an object where we're going to have several properties. So we're going to have the name, referring to the name of our file. We're going to have the size, last modified, and finally we also need the HTML content of the table row. Then once you sort these elements, then you can build the right content for your table and change the HTML content of the table body. So let's call this time instead of last modified. All right, so to create this object, we're going to need to loop through the table rows of our table body. So loop through the children of table body. So to do that, let's define a variable children where we're going to store the children of table body. So we can use jQuery here. So selecting the elements using its tag, table body, and then we're accessing the children. Now, if you check the type of the children variable, you'll find that it is an object. But if you check children.forEach, you'll see that it's undefined. So we can't use forEach with our variable children. We'll need to convert it to an array so that we can use forEach. So to convert it to an array, we are going to define an array, children array. So that's going to be an empty array. And then we're going to push the elements of children inside this array. So we're going to use a for loop. So starting from index 0, then the condition is I less than the length of children, and every time we increment I by 1. And we are just pushing the items inside the final array. So now if you console.log this new variable, the array, then let's see what we get. There is an error right there. That's supposed to be a semicolon. So let's try again. So that's our array, and we can see all the table rows there. Now for each element inside this array, we're going to need to build an object just like that, where we're going to store the name, the size, time, and HTML. So let's use forEach on children array. So now we are building an array of objects, which we'll be able to sort later on. So forEach will take a function. So we're gonna take the element of the array, and then let's write some code. Just to check that we're doing things right, let's just console.log the HTML contents of each element. All right, so you can see the inner HTML of each table row. Now let's get the data name attribute, for example, of table row. So we can't see the attributes here because we're only seeing the inner HTML. So let's try outer HTML instead. Here we go. Now we can see the attributes. So let's get one of those attributes. So console.log element get attribute, and let's try data name. You can see the name printed there. All right, now let's create our object content. And let's name it row details instead. So the name is going to be that. The size is going to be get attribute data size. The time is going to be get attribute data time. And the HTML is going to be the outer HTML of our elements. Now just make sure you use the outer HTML here, not the inner HTML, because you want to rebuild the whole table row, not only its inner HTML. Now, we said that we are building an array of these objects. So let's create that array. So let's call it items. Now, it's fine to use consts with an array. That is absolutely fine. It's like you do that with an object. So, but you can't do that with a primitive type. So if we had a primitive type, we would have to use let. So once you create the row details, you just push inside the items. So we push row details inside items. Now let's console.log items. And see what we get. So we don't need the terminal at the moment. So that's our array, and you can see the objects inside the array, and this is exactly what we needed. Now the size and the time are supposed to be numbers, so let's convert these strings to numbers. So instead of that, let's copy that inside parse integer. And let's do the same thing with the data time. And just a comment, if you kept the data time in your code as a float, then just make sure you use parse float. But parse int will still be fine. It's just gonna ignore whatever digits you've got in the decimal parts. So let's try again. And now these are numbers. All right, now we will need to create a function which will take an array like this one and then sort the elements of the array by name in the ascending order. So let's call it sort name up. So it's going to take the items array, or any array called items, and will just sort the array for us. So as you may have guessed, we're going to pass a function to the sort method as we did before in our example. So I'll let you do that, and let's check the solution in the next video.